Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the wisdom of Edgar Cayce. We're coming to you as always, courtesy of our broadcasting partner, moretalk.tv. Joining me this week on the show, I'm very honored to welcome Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon. Dr. Edgar Mitchell had a life-changing experience during his Apollo 14 missions up in space. This later led him to found the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which sponsors research into the nature of consciousness. Scientist, test pilot, naval officer, astronaut, author, and lecturer. His extraordinary career personifies humankind's eternal thrust to widen its horizons as well as its inner soul. Dr. Edgar Mitchell's rich academic background includes degrees from Carnegie Mellon University and MIT, an honorary doctorate in engineering from New Mexico State University, as well as the University of Akron. He also has a doctorate of science from Embry-Riddle University. He has received many awards and honors, including a nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005. He has devoted the past 4 decades to studying human consciousness and psychic and paranormal phenomena in his search for common ground between science and spirit. Dr. Mitchell is the featured presenter at the upcoming ARE conference here in Virginia Beach that's entitled Breakthroughs Towards a New Consciousness, Science, Spirituality, and the Limitless Mind. And this takes place from March 27th through the 29th, and you can register at edgarcayce.org/conferences. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections, the wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
Thank you for inviting me, and we'll go right ahead with the program you'd like.
Absolutely. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your background information about what it was like going up into space, and maybe tell us a little bit about the experiments you conducted and how that led into your founding the Institute of Noetic Sciences to explore consciousness.
Okay, well, going into space, I've been a test pilot for the Navy. I flew during the Korean War for the Navy aboard aircraft carriers, and then went back to test pilot duty. And about that time, NASA was formed, and I decided I wanted to do that, and placed myself in line to be selected as an astronaut, and was. But going into space, what we were talking about here with regard to your subject matter, I had been a student of, not situated with, but a student of J.B. Ryan at Duke University in his experiments in mind over matter material, psychic stuff. And I was very interested in that. And on my space flight, I did my own experiment following what he had done. And we got as good a results at 200,000 miles out in space as he got next door to each other in the laboratory, showing that quantum entanglement, which is what psychic stuff is all about, isn't restricted by the distance. And so that was very satisfying to me when I came back and was interested in furthering that. And as I came back and got involved on that, after the beauty of being able to see Earth from distance and space, and seeing as a part of the heavens and a part of its place in the universe, which is a powerful experience. And then coming back and pursuing that psychic stuff on the ground, and showing it thanks to the powers of Uri Geller, who was bending metal with his mind, and doing those sorts of things. And then he went on television and demonstrated it, and finding little boys that could bend spoons like he had done. And that put a lot of emphasis in starting my Noetic Foundation to study the nature of consciousness and bring it in as a powerful scientific methodology to study consciousness in an even deeper way. Because until that point in time, consciousness had never been considered a part of the scientific community, a proper subject for the scientific community.
Right. And what was it like being a pioneer in that field where you were exploring a topic of research that had not been accepted by the scientific community. Did you receive some resistance? What were those initial first years like?
Well, that's fun because going to the moon, nobody had done that either. So that's what we
Right.
were, explorers going to the moon. And it turns out explorers into the realm of consciousness at the same time made it doubly interesting. And the
Right.
epiphany that I had in space of seeing Earth from that distance and being overwhelmed by the beauty of it, and having what I learned later was called in the ancient Sanskrit a samadhi experience of
Right.
seeing things in that from that perspective. And that was the beauty part of my space flight, was that both of those were powerful experiences outside the box, as it were, that helped us move science forward a long ways.
Absolutely. And we talked a bit about the mind body connection, and this has kind of been formed the basis of your studies at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And this, of course, goes hand in hand with Cayce's readings, and he stated that thoughts are as real as any physical thing that we can see with our eyes and touch with our hands. What have you found in your studies over the years at the Institute of Noetic Sciences about these principles?
Well, I say, let me take you to the end product here. Whereas for 400 years, since the time of Descartes and his pronouncements, uh, Kepler and Newton and other scientists of the early years thought matter and energy were the two principal aspects of our universe. Well, it's very clear now after what we have done in the last century, mostly with quantum mechanics, that matter, energy, and awareness are all required to understand the fullness of the universe that we're in. And that's a pretty powerful step.
Right. Absolutely. And you talked a bit about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and maybe not all of our listeners are totally familiar with what exactly that implies. And I know in your books and your lectures, you talk about the universe being a quantum hologram. And can you kind of expound a little bit on what exactly that means for the layperson?
Sure. Well, a couple of things here. Let's say that quantum entanglement is become a rather well-known subject. The fact is that Rupert Sheldrake wrote books on how your dog at home anticipates you're coming home, leaving the office. You're quantum
Right.
entangled with your animals, so when you get home, they're greeting you there at the door. Well, that's the whole thing on the basis of getting consciousness going. At the bottom rung of consciousness is simply the fact of awareness. And I often make the statement, in the English language, we call intuition our sixth sense, but really we ought to call it our first sense, since it's rooted in the quantum world, which is really more fundamental than the others. And so by bringing consciousness, quantum entanglement into our thinking and understanding as a science, we have added a third faculty to the nature of the universe that we're in. Instead of just matter and energy, it consists of matter, energy, and awareness. And awareness comes right out of the quantum entanglement of particles. And that's only really become well recognized and a part of science here in the last 40 years or so, but particularly here into the 21st century.
Right. Absolutely.
But Cayce and J.B. Ryan and the early greats that were exploring this stuff back in the 20th century um, were the pioneers that helped get it going.
Right. Absolutely. And I love the quote where many of our brightest minds are claimed to be standing on the shoulders of giants. So, in saying that, and of course, we talk about looking forward into the future, and in regards to this study of consciousness, who would you say? Of course, I know you have Dean Radin, who's working with your organization. Whose work is really inspiring you today in the field of study of consciousness?
Well, there are many, many people around the world in physics departments and major universities and they're doing their own thing to put good meat on the bones of our understanding of consciousness as we now experience it. And you'd have to go on, if you go on the internet and get tangled up in the right group of people, there's some powerful experiments going on around the world, in India, in the United States, and a number of universities in all these places that are bringing out stuff every day that is
Right.
moving us forward in understanding all of this. So we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all very inspiring, and especially the work that's going on at the institute that you founded. In relation to that, I know you're a big proponent of sustainability, and this to me is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. What can you tell us about your interest in sustainability and the research that you've conducted in that field over the years, and what you see as are moving as a human population here on Earth towards sustainability?
Well, our problem here is the fact that what's hurt our sustainability is our growth in population, where we've gone from 1.9 billion people at the beginning of the 20th century to over 7 billion people at the beginning of the 21st century, and headed for a lot more by the middle of our century. And the consumption of the non-renewable resources that our crowd of population has on the world at this point is not sustainable. That's what non-sustainability is all about, is that we're eating ourselves out of house and home and consuming ourselves out of house and home, and with just too many people demanding too many things to stay alive. And so the best guess is that we're not going to make it another 100 years unless we change our ways in some way. And the question is, are we prepared as individuals to understand exactly what's happening with the population growth? Now, we have to feed people. Everybody that gets born has to be fed and make a living. But we've got to start doing something differently here if we're going to be able to keep people alive on this planet. And a part of that is getting off the planet and going someplace else. And Mars is a possible place to get started there. And that's why studying extraterrestrials is important. The evidence suggests they have been coming here for a long, long time, but they have means of getting here that we don't have means of getting there. So we've got, by the development that we have to have, is to learn how to use the means, and I believe that's zero-point energy. That's part of my research, is to be able to use zero-point energy to help us get to places in our universe that we haven't been able to get to before. And I believe that's how the ETs get here.
Absolutely. And this idea of 0 point energy, I know we may have some listeners out there who aren't totally familiar with what exactly is 0 point energy. So I was wondering if you can give us a brief explanation of where that
Sure.
idea came from and what the latest research tells us about it.
0 point energy is, or the 0 point, which is the most base point in all of energy and matter, the coldest temperature, and absolute zero on that scale. And it appears, first of all, let's talk about the quantum hologram, which leads into that. The quantum hologram is a discovery of Max Planck's. Max Planck discovered that all matter emits photons all the time. And what a scientist by the name of Walter Schimp, a descendant of Kepler, by the way, a German physicist, descendant of Kepler, discovered that all those emissions from matter, all matter is emitting photons, are quantum entangled, carry the information about the emitting object, and we call that a quantum hologram. And he only discovered that in about the 1990s, and so it's a fairly new thing, but it's helping us learn a lot about the 0 point itself, and what 0 point energy is. And 0 point energy is the fundamental area fundamental state of energy before it becomes basic matter, and our heavy matter is made in star systems, but the 0 point energy comes along before it gets into star systems. Star systems start with 0 point energy. And the idea is that it would appear that the ETs use some form of that to come here and have for a long time.
Right, absolutely. And for somebody who's trying to kind of wrap their head around, maybe this is a new concept to them, this 0 point energy, how would that be applicable in your everyday life? Because I know Cayce talked about in meditation and prayer and in our moments of silence, we have this ability to connect to what he called the creative forces, which I see it as maybe talking about this similar 0 point energy, this ability for the human potential to tap into this infinite source of energy.
So what we've done is put a name on that creativity and ability of energy to manifest itself in usable forms. And it's a 0 point is the basic plenum, the zero from which it all comes. Now we don't understand a lot about that at all, but that's
Right.
the name we give to it, and it's appropriate that it have a name. But we still don't know how to mine or bring that energy out the way nature does to make matter and make all of us out of it, make a universe out of it.
Right. Absolutely. And this idea that, of course, you tackled by starting the Institute of Noetic Sciences, kind of bridging the gap between our rational, logical mind and our intuitive selves. How important is that as individuals as we work towards sustainability and move into a bright future? How important is it to balance this idea of being involved with the science and studying the science, but also working with your intuitive forces?
It's absolutely vital because it's another facet of our existence. Uh, we talk, but we don't always sing. Well, talking and singing are two facets of using our talents and using our capabilities to do different things with them. Well, 0 point energy is just a different facet of the energy we use. Electromagnetic energy is another type of energy that comes out of all of this. And learning the physics of how all of this fits together to make a universe. That's what physics is all about these days, is trying to understand how all of it fits together from quantum entanglement of particles on up the line to universes.
Right, absolutely. And coming from a message from such an inspiring scientist, I know so many people are very inspired, me personally, about your life story and the work that you put in your life to bring out this idea of consciousness and the depths of scientific exploration that we can do into the field. But what advice would you give to somebody who seems to be struggling with what's going on around them as far as not coping well with their reality, not being able to experience this deep interconnectedness? Is there any advice that you would offer somebody who's in that ship?
The main thing to understand, I believe, is a fundamental property that we humans have to attach ourselves to. Is the fundamental property of love, to love nature, to love ourselves, to understand how we all fit together, and like your children, you love your children, you promote, you teach your children how to fit into the universe in a loving universe. And the main thing is to bring out the love aspect of this universe that we're in. Everybody, sooner or later, knows what that means, or they know that they're cutting it off, and that's not a good way to live a life.
Right, absolutely. And as you go about studying the research, I've done quite a bit of uh, looking into what's going on at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and you guys are doing some incredibly groundbreaking research studies. For you personally, what are you most inspired by what you're studying there at the Institute of Noetic Sciences?
Well, I think what we're just talking about it, all these little bits and pieces that come out of this starting with quantum entanglement of particles, leads to something up on a larger scale. And understanding the facets of this on the different scale sizes that we run into, and as full-blown human beings here, uh, one of the downsides of it, we create wars and we kill each other. And that, of course, is something we have to learn how to manage better, and so that we don't do it, that we use the love side of the equation to approach people in a different way, so that we're not in the hostilities. We're in find ways to be productive, and that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. And for me personally, on my journey, I love studying the life's work of great scientists like yourself and the ones who came before you. We've talked about Planck, we've mentioned Einstein. There's so many great quantum physicists who, in their private life, you don't get to see necessarily unless you really dive into their life's work, how mystical they truly were. Is this something that you found is kind of a hallmark of many scientists within the community that you've worked with?
Well, yes, they're looking for the bigger picture. They're always looking for
Right.
the big picture and the underpinnings of that picture. And that's where the quantum science come into it. Quantum science is very fundamental at a very, very base level. And Newton and Kepler showed how things came together. But then there were some subtle things that did not manifest till we got into the quantum world and more sophisticated equipment to see we could measure it and look at it at these deeper levels.
Right.
And the feelings and emotions that we have come out of all of that.
Right. Absolutely. And in talking about that, I want to mention a little bit about, in my personal research, I find that there's an incredible, seemingly unlimited wealth of brilliant, free thinking scientific minds of a younger generation that seem to be coming up. In saying that, is your personal experience shown you that the future is in good hands when we refer to our spaceship Earth and the future of humankind?
Well, if we use our intelligence and our research capabilities to move toward the love and kindness and the integrative side of things, as opposed to the warlike side of things, the hostilities about, then yes, that's part of creating the sustainable future that humans need. If we're going to continue to, even though warring and disputing has been a part of it all along, that's the downside of our existence. Is instead of the love side, that's the downside. And if we're going to survive, we need to emphasize the positive side of all of our emotions and our feelings and our activities.
Absolutely. Another topic I wanted to touch on was kind of the general topic of ego, and I find that from reading your life's work, I believe the ego is a bit of an issue that we cope with, and that, and I'll put it this way: many people lose this kind of big picture perspective, and you see a lot of times a lack of a big picture perspective where. As you having your experience as an astronaut, you were able to gain what you call this samadhi experience, which I believe probably put a lot of things in perspective for you and really changed you as an individual. Um, do you feel it is absolutely essential that everyone have this big picture perspective, and why do we struggle so much to see outside kind of our small boxed in world?
Well, that's the whole point. If all we're interested in is ourselves, and that's the ego portion of it, most often that ego portion is oriented toward controlling others as opposed to loving others. And
Right.
that's kind of part of the trick here of learning sustainability, is learning to get beyond self and learning to be interactive with our neighbors and with each other, with our family, with the world, and in a positive way, a loving
Yeah.
way.
Absolutely. And this whole blooming of technology that we've seen in the decades that have come, and we see it just really picking up speed in the future. I see this as kind of a double-edged sword in that you see some of the negative aspects where people seem to be shrinking their world with technology and failing to be out in nature and spend time studying, the bigger picture and gaining that perspective that we've talked about. But then, of course, you have the other side where you have the quantum physicists who are doing these incredible, groundbreaking studies using this technology, these new amazing advancements. What are your thoughts on this idea?
Oh, that's what we've already talked about. It's the emotional aspect of it. Are we using it for self-service? Are we using it to
Right.
love and care for the larger picture? It goes right back to our emotions of what are our emotions toward each other and toward the larger picture. Do we do it in a loving way or do we do it in a selfish way? And that's the dividing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And can you share with us a little bit about your personal experience about what it was like just being in space and having that samadhi experience? And of course, I want to kind of have this lead into, do you believe that we're alone in the universe? And what is your opinion on what's truly out there that we don't comprehend in the universe?
No, I, I think that the evidence is very strong. We're not alone in the universe. That the extraterrestrials have been coming here for a long, long time. Even in our biblical text, there's stories of chariots of fire in the sky, which
Right.
could only be from coming from somewhere else. So the more we explore cosmology and try to answer the questions, who are we and what is our universe all about, the bigger it becomes, the more complex it becomes, and we're just one grain of sand on a huge beach, it looks like.
Right. And do you believe we're headed in a direction to accept the idea of extraterrestrials and accept that we are not the only intelligent life form? Will we eventually get there, do you feel?
We've got to get there because that's the way it is.
Yeah. Well said. Absolutely. And I wanted to touch a little bit about touch on your upcoming conference here at the ARE in Virginia Beach. And this conference, the overall conference is entitled Breakthroughs Toward a New Consciousness, Science, Spirituality, and the Limitless Mind. And that's here at the ARE in Virginia Beach from March 27th through the 29th. Can you tell us a little bit about what your presentation will be like? Aside from what we've already talked about, what can conference attendees expect to take away from
Well, you've already
sharing?
touched on I'm going to talk about. In fact, I'll take my cues from you and from the other people in your organization. What do you want me to talk about? I'll talk about what you want me to talk about, but by and large, it's what we've just been talking about. That's how does this all fit together? Are we sustainable? Are the ETs here? How do we move with this love and entanglement? Are we going to be hostile and kill each other off? Or are we going to work together in a loving way? That's what sustainability is all about. So
Absolutely.
that's all I have to say.
Well, Dr. Edgar Mitchell, thank you so much. It's really been an honor sharing in this conversation with you, and we're very honored to have you as a part of the ARE family to come speak with us here in Virginia Beach. So thank you so much for doing what you do. Your life's work is truly inspiring to myself and countless individuals out there. So thank you so much.
Okay, and we'll see you soon, I think.
And don't miss your chance to see Dr. Edgar Mitchell in person, as he is the featured presenter at the upcoming ARE conference here in beautiful Virginia Beach. And this conference is entitled Breakthroughs Towards a New Consciousness, Science, Spirituality, and Limitless Mind. This takes place from March 27th through the 29th, and you can register for this and other conferences offered here at the ARE by visiting our website at edgarcayce.org/conferences. I'd like to end the show today by sharing a short excerpt from one of Dr. Mitchell's beautiful poems. This one in particular is entitled Insight, and it reads, Human eyes seldom view the pattern of dew that forms on each leaf in the dawn. Too busy with care, we move unaware of creation's unfolding love song. You can find the full poem on his website at edgarmitchellapollo14.com. And on behalf of everyone here at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, and of course, moretalk.tv, I'm your host, Brenton Bickerstaff, reminding you to expand your awareness in love and gratitude for all that is. As Dr. Mitchell reminded us, we can create our future with love or we can create it with fear and violence. The choice is truly yours to make every day. I encourage all our listeners to continue to choose love in all your pursuits in life. And as Casey said, we can all create heaven here on earth by supporting one another and being of service to our fellow man. Hope everyone enjoyed the show this week, and you all have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I will see you next week. And now it is time for the thought for the day again here on Reflections. And joining me as always is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections for the thought for the day.
Oh, my pleasure, Brent. Thank you once again for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And if you can go ahead and read the thought for the day today for our listeners.
I'd be happy to. This reading comes from 3209-2. For many an individual entity, those things that are of sorrow are the greater helps for unfolding. You know, this can be a difficult one to swallow. You know, when you're really going through a traumatic experience, you know, it's easy to say this when life is running smoothly. You know, but when things are falling apart, if you've gone through a crisis, you know, or a tremendous loss in your life, it's really difficult to look at it in these terms. But, you know, at those difficult times, during those difficult times, it's so important to remember what Casey talked about again and again, that there is a place inside of us that we can go to where there is love. There is a hug on the inside from a greater power. And we need that. We need that hug. We need that nurturing. We need that safe place to go when the world around us seems to be falling apart, when we seem to be falling apart. That place in the inside is always there. And again, the Casey readings recommended that we go there and replenish ourselves. When things are going smoothly, we can forget to go there. When things are falling apart, we can forget to go there. But it's so important to remember to go inside and feel the comfort that is there. And, you know, I think by doing that, this tremendous gain in unfoldment, we start to really realize that this divine entity is ours to know and to share with other people. And it's about the only thing that can really keep us sane in the world that we live in sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I think you raised a really good point when you said that this is something that's difficult to put into practice in the moment. When we are in those moments of sorrow, it's tough sometimes to keep this as your reference. And this is much easier, of course, as you said, in hindsight. When you look back, it's much easier to realize that, oh, these sorrowful moments where times got hard, times got a little dark, I was a little depressed, I was struggling to get through things, or I was struggling with my external environment and what it was trying to show me, and I wasn't quite getting it and I didn't understand. Looking back in hindsight, it's easy to say, oh, you know, I get it now. I can see the big picture. I can see why this was all happening. I can see why I was reacting the way I was to this. But in the moment, I think if you're able to keep this perspective in the moment, and in a way, it really matches up with the ideals of having the ideal of awareness and realizing that the moments of great sorrow can easily turn into your moments that are catalysts for your greatest spiritual growth and your greatest spiritual understanding. Excuse me. And I think he really hits the head on this when he says the moments of sorrow are the greater helps for unfoldment. So if you want to work with your ideals and work on progressing as an individual and becoming more aware and realizing this deeper state of peace, you have to realize that the moments of sorrow are necessary, because how can you experience what it's like to experience a high if you haven't experienced a low to have that reference? You never know what a high was if your whole life was full of highs. You got to have those lows in order to keep it balanced.
Yes, yes. And I think consistency in our application is so important. I know that every morning my wife and I start the day with prayer and meditation, and usually a spiritual reading, some time for reading and prayer and meditation following. And it's a good hour that we spend each morning doing that. And I really feel like over the years that's given me a more even keel. Not that I don't fly off the handle, and go with the ups and downs, but by being consistent in the good times, it's easier to go there, to that place on the inside, in the tougher times. And I think without that consistency, I probably would forget it, and I don't want to ever forget it.
Right. Yeah. And that raises a beautiful point, because I think that was something Cayce was also very big on, is consistency. He even went so far as to say, if you can meditate the same time every day, like you say, when you guys wake up, you have that time of prayer and that time of meditation, that time of reflection on spiritual scripture. If you can consistently do that every day, Cayce made it very clear that that's when you really start to open things up, open up your relationship to God, open up your relationship to that deeper God that's within you, that's constantly working with you and trying to show you, ways on your path, the next step to take, and show you the beauty, let the beauty unfold.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Such a
absolutely.
great
Well, Bill, thank you so much for sharing that. It's wonderful to get your personal story on that. And thank you, as always, for joining me on the Thought for the Day here on Reflections. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Brent. I always enjoy being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful.
Have a great day.
Absolutely. We'll see you next week.
I look
Thank you.
forward
You
to it.
too.